Welcome everybody to the virtual Fireside chat with Enoch Li, who's the founder of Bearapy. And to get started, we'd just like to give Enoch an opportunity to introduce herself and tell a little bit of her story. I am, of course, Bechara Saab, CEO of Mobio Interactive. We are the creators of All. Enoch, please, could you just share us a little bit about your story and how Bearapy came to be?
Sure, of course. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here today and to do a bit more playing with everybody. Been looking forward to this. If I start with my story, I think I was just actually looking at the dates with Bechara before the Fireside chat and looking at the date of the 3rd of September. And I remember it very clearly because if we go back 11 years exactly around this time was when I had just arrived in Beijing from Tokyo. And back then I had a corporate job in a bank. I thought I was really cool, you know, work hard, play hard, moving around, high flying banker, that sort of thing. And Beijing was one of my promotions here from Tokyo. And it was right around this time that I actually started feeling quite ill with migraines, and I had to start to see a doctor, and which back then I didn't understand the pain, but it has propelled me now 11 years to run this company Bearapy, where we look at workplace mental health with companies at an organizational level, and also doing workshops and training for executives. So how did I really get here? I think that's where the story is when I got physically ill at that time, I wasn't quite sure what was going on. And my boyfriend, who is the same person as my husband now, he said, go see the doctor. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll see the doctor. And because I had really bad migraines, I really was focused on the physical symptoms of what was going on, and said, you know, I checked with neurologists, I checked with ear, nose, throat. I even went to Hong Kong to see a brain specialist. And when the doctor said to me, you know, maybe you should see a psychologist, you might be a little bit stressed, I shrugged and I went, you know, 20 something, how can I be stressed? I can deal with it. I'm invincible, you know, like, and this is in the context of somebody growing up in Hong Kong, overachieving perfectionist. It's 200 out of 100 each time that I wanted. And I lived my life like that, where I thought I could deal with everything. But eventually around this time, the migraines became so debilitating that I had to take time off work. And the doctor gave me a month of sick leave. And it was in this month of sick leave that I started to sink into clinical depression. Now, back then, I didn't understand what it was. And what it felt like was it was a period where my life was filled with meaninglessness. I had no idea what was going on, didn't like my job, had no appetite, didn't eat. And eventually I did say, okay, fine, I'll go see a psychologist. And he did an assessment and diagnostic test on me and said, Enoch, you have severe depression. And afterwards, he told me, my response to him back then was, oh, great, when do I go back to work? Now, at that time, like, work was my only thing. That was my identity. It was my life. You know, I didn't have anything outside of it, because all in my mind was, let me climb the corporate ladder. And as I sank deeper into clinical depression, since then I've had to take a few months off work. I couldn't go back to work. I was completely dysfunctional. I was also very emotional. I didn't understand it, so I was really also angry with myself of, why am I going through this? What am I doing wrong? Why is it happening to me? It felt like everything was going fine. You know, good job, good life. Boyfriend looked cute enough. You know, what is the matter with me? And for a few months, like almost a few months, I didn't really leave the apartment. Like, I might go down for a little walk when Tim was able to drag me out, but you know, it was days and ends of being on my own and not able to see people. I couldn't look people in the eye. But somehow, I don't know how Tim did it, but he managed to drag me out to a nearby shopping mall one day. And I still remember that feeling. It was so cold. It was winter in Beijing. It's so cold. It was snowing a bit. And I was walking just downcasted, not looking at anybody, dragging my feet. And somehow, as we were loitering around the shopping mall, we came across this toy shop. And Tim had to go to the bathroom. So I was loitering outside. And as he walked out, he saw something he hadn't seen for months. And he saw a smile on my face. And when he looked at me, he saw me smiling at a bear. And I swear at that time, I thought the bear was looking up at me and smiling at me, and I smiled back. And Tim told me afterwards, he didn't think twice. He said, wow, I haven't seen her smile in months. I'm going to buy this bear if that's what makes her smile. And it's one of those bears where it's not your typical teddy bear, 2 years here in the nose. It's more shaped like a polar bear, like almost looking up at you. And when we got home, Tim said, why don't you give the bear a name? I said, oh, okay, I'll call him Floppy. And he asked, well, why Floppy? I'm like, well, I don't know. He flops around all day, watches TV and eats mosquitoes. Doesn't do much. And back then I didn't know.
Mosquitoes?
Yeah, he eats mosquitoes. Like, I have no idea where that came from, but that came from nowhere. But a few years later, as I went on to study organizational psychology, psychodynamics, and psychology, and doing a lot of research on playfulness, I realized what I was doing back then was a lot of the thoughts in my unconscious mind was coming through interacting with the bear, Floppy, which was the form of play. When I call him Floppy, flopping around all day, not doing much, like, guess who that was at that point in time? But because it was so hard to look at myself and to go, I'm depressed, what do I need to do? And to get myself out of it, it became safer to project that part of me that I couldn't deal with onto this cute looking bear. And then it became easier to go, okay, what is this bear thinking? What is his life? Why is he like that? And to slowly process my own experience, which was what happened because thankfully I have some wonderful friends who, when they found out I liked this bear, gave me different shapes and sizes of the same bear in the same design. And I almost became known as the bear girl, like they're like Enoch and the bears. And with each bear that came along, there was a personality and a name. And back then for me, it was just something fun. It almost felt quite silly because I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm 30 and I'm playing with stuffed toy animals. What's wrong with me now? Right? Like the assumption of playing is not for adults. The assumption of playing with bears or toys, it's silly. But with each bear yeah.
Did you speak with a clinician about this, or like with your psychologist about the playing with bears, and what was their response?
Yeah. So he was very supportive. He said, well, he even suggested that I take them out on some soul searching trips to travel again. He said, why don't you take a bear with you? And he also understood that I liked writing. I used to write a lot when I was a kid. And as I started to work, that whole side of the creativity stopped. And so why don't you start writing stories about your bears? How do they see the world? And I did look at him skeptical and go, okay, is he as mad as I am? Like, what's going on here? But I took his advice, and that's what I started in the beginning, was traveling with the bears, doing photos with them, which looked really, if I look back, and back then I even felt, am I a bit silly? Are people looking at me? And now I can see also my internal judgment on myself of playing is silly. I shouldn't be doing that because I'm not 5. And you hear that a lot. Stop playing. You're not a child anymore. Right? Yeah. Where I think this is the essence of what we have lost over the years, is that courage to play and to have fun. And that's what I did. I wrote stories of them. I did a photo blog. They looked at life from their different personalities, different perspectives. I have a bear who is a banker bear, super calculating, guess who that is. And then I have a bear who's a chilly bear whose goal in life is just to chill out and relax and enjoy. And that's probably a more aspirational me of where I want to get at from my burnout. So that's where the story started. That's where I started to play again, and I realized that, oh, this can be fun. And it's really as I progressed in my studies and thinking through the research and looking at the research of playfulness out there, whether it's from a sociological perspective, psychology, anthropology, culture, neuroscience, which you would know much better than me on, is play is such an essential part of life, whether you're a child or an adult, for our learning, for our creativity, and also for our stress reduction, that I started to think about, well, in my experience, if learning to play can bring me out of my depression again, could it help others? A few years ago, nobody really wanted to talk about mental health. This year, for better or for worse, mental health seems to be the forefront of a lot of people's mind, with depression, anxiety due to all the changes globally. And so it has really propelled me to go, yes, I would like to work on mental health for people who are in workplaces, but what can be new? What different perspectives can we bring them? And how can we make this topic that is usually so strongly stigmatized something more fun, where they can access their inner self and learn about themselves, their own mental health, their own self-awareness. And their Bearapy was born. And I think it evolved over time, and it wasn't one of those where, okay, this is the idea and let me do this, but it really was built upon the story and the lived experience of people who have tried it out.
It's interesting, you know, in something you mentioned was, you know, you went to see a physician and they recommended taking some time off. And it was during the time off when you really went into fell into clinical depression. And I think, you know, that's often the case, is that when you allow yourself a little bit of breathing room, then you know, like the clinical depression it can be viewed not actually as the disease, but rather the beginning of the healing process. There's an old theory in psychiatry called positive disintegration, which really refers to a lot of mental illnesses, particularly affect disorders, centering around a sort of a you know, disintegration of the normal way that you behave, as a way to actually repair problems and issues that are present, but you're ignoring or you're unable to address because you're so caught up in your day-to-day life, or in your career or your family or whatever it might be. And then having that ability to pause for a little bit can allow this process to happen. And the key thing is to not think of it as a bad thing. Right? I mean, it was actually a good thing, right? Because it allowed you to undergo this healing process. That's super interesting to learn. And then when it comes to play, of course, I mean, behavioral psychologists have known for ages, and all throughout the animal kingdom, that play is an extremely important part of learning and development. You know, you see that in the cats in terms of how they hunt, etc. Right? You know, building up the skills, even just general exercise. But then, of course, stress reduction as well, right? Laughing is the best medicine, you hear, and laughter often is accompanied by play. But what I find so intriguing about your story is how organic and how natural it was, and how you immediately gave the bear a name, and you know your imagination immediately started to pick up on this, and it's really cool how the clinician you were working with also encouraged you to leverage the bears. I mean, I think that's quite fortunate, actually, instead of just saying no, take the drugs, you know.
Like go through your CBT.
That's really cool. Okay, and then of course, so then you talked about Bearapy starting, which I think is a really interesting term for the therapy. We have the Teddy Bearapy. And so now you've delivered some content, you've created a curriculum. I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about what this looks like for different types of clients. On your website, you list, you know, for in the workplace and also in communities. Maybe do you have any examples in the workplace, or how it goes about? What does this look like?
Sure. And I really agree with your point about the defragmentation of the self, and so that we can rebuild. And that idea is very central, I think, to Bearapy, where the defragmentation using these toys and objects, like for me, it was a teddy bear that meant something to me, but for other people, it could be other objects, it could be other toys that they have emotional attachment to. And that defragmentation done through a medium or channel makes it easier to digest in some ways, because confronting oneself is not always pleasant, and if anything could be quite painful. But as you say, as we digest the pain and stay with it, that's how we rebuild the self and a different sense of identity and knowing ourselves. And that's really central to the idea of what we do in what I call play shops. And also even in our mental health workshops and training, we infuse the idea of play in activities. So one thing that always comes to my mind when I talk about this as a workplace situation where we use play, because a lot of people have biases against play. You talk about play to be like, well, you know, this is work, you know, it's not productive, it's a waste of time, we can't play. And it takes a lot of nurturing and educating people to say, well, actually, you know, play can be something else. And so one thing we did was with a one of the international hotel groups, all the HR senior executives of that hotel group of the different properties came together because they were very stressed out. And the area head would say, well, Enoch, can you just do something with them, just help them de-stress. And in the process, we also understood that they face a lot of issues and challenges internally with people, turnover, and of course, a lot of stakeholder management. And so one activity that we did, and they were also very good sport, like they probably thought I was out of my mind when I told them to do this, but they came prepared. I said, bring an object or toy, just something simple that you just grab off your desk. That's always been there with you or means something to you, or bring a toy, there's a lot of freedom. And so the activity involved them using their toy and talking to each other through their toy about an issue that they were facing. And it's not as simple. I said, you've got to think about if you were that toy or object, what would their voice sound like? And
so they did the voices too?
Different voice. They did the voices. And you can imagine, like, these are people who are maybe age range, I'm guessing, 40 to 50, worked for a long time, HR, very professional. And I could feel it when I first told them what to do, there was that silence of, is she for real? But they did it. Like, I gave them a bit of parameters as well, and really this is built upon a technique that we use in coaching as well, asking why, the 5 whys, the listening, the active listening between the two. So the toys are talking to each other. One toy says the problem, and the other one asks why. That's all the other toy has to do, and then they swap. So really what it's doing, it's getting the toy / person to think deeper and a different perspective of the issue, instead of just thinking, how do I solve it? Is to go into the bottom of the root of the issue. What actually is the matter? Why does it even matter so much? And at the end of about, like as the first sort of 30 seconds, you can feel the awkwardness in the room. And then by about a minute or two, you start to hear the giggles and the laughter, because they're laughing at, the funny voices. They're laughing at each other. They're laughing at themselves of, I'm actually doing this. And after 15 to 20 minutes of the conversation, the feedback was, oh, I found out that my problem isn't as big of a deal as I thought. I actually thought of a different solution. I thought about a different perspective. And they say, actually, that was quite fun. I haven't laughed like that for such a long time. And I think the effectiveness of it isn't just about the technique of this is the game you play. It's really the effect or the side sort of purpose and gain that you have with the laughter, with the relaxation, that you go, okay, I don't need to take myself so seriously all the time. Give myself a bit of a break, clear my mind, and then I can come back to whatever challenges I was facing.
In many ways, the projection of yourself onto a toy, teddy bear or whatever it is quite similar to an out-of-body experience, where you remove yourself from your own body, and then you try to look at yourself from a different perspective, right? Because as you project an element of yourself or a certain problem you're having onto another toy, you can look at it from a different perspective. But essentially, you're looking at yourself again. So in many ways, there's parallels with the out-of-body experience, which is now being used quite extensively for as a tool within psychotherapy. And often they do it with virtual reality. So, you get to a point where you can actually see your own body through virtual goggles, and then like pop out and then look down on yourself and have a different angle. And often they use psychedelics, so magic mushrooms or LSD or something, to really give this altered state, so you can look at yourself differently. And it didn't really occur to me before, but actually this projection business with a toy, I think is accomplishing some of those very same helpful type tools, but I think in a much more subtle but much more accessible way. Right? I think it's probably easier to project than it is to have an out-of-body experience.
And I think the research, I'm not as familiar with the sort of the neuroscience side of the research, but I have read a lot on it of when the person is in a playful state, when you're starting to measure brain chemicals and the waves and all of it, what's happening in the brain, it's very likened to a state of flow, or when you reach some sort of meditative state. And that's what enables the person to go to really be having a much clearer mind, to be engaged in what they're doing. Like, my training has been much more from a clinical or psychodynamic perspective. So I see it also as an access to our unconscious mind, where it can come up and surface without feeling so threatening, because a lot of things are in our unconscious mind, expressly because it's not so easy to deal with, such as our fears and assumptions. And so when we're able to, like you say, take that perspective and look at ourselves from higher up, from outside, then we may be able to help ourselves see something from a different perspective and go, okay, well, have I thought about this before? Or is this element something I've forgotten?
You gave a little bit of an example of, what it's like to help executives and people in the workplace play and do some projection and have some fun. What types of objects do they bring in? Do people tend to bring in a toy, or do they just grab something randomly from their desk, like a stapler or something, or what sort of objects are we looking at?
Usually I give them the instruction of bring something from your desk that's not work related, right? So don't come in with a laptop and a phone. So that was the parameters. And usually people, more, I would say, roughly 90–95% of people actually bring something in because they're quite curious about what are we going to do with it. I have, of course, had some people who, for whatever reason, don't bring something, and then they say, can I use my iPhone? And in those cases, I'm like, okay, we can pretend the iPhone is something else and turn it on to airplane mode. But people have brought all sorts of objects. Some people have brought figurines, toys, stuffed animals. I have seen card holders. I've seen pictures of themselves, of their families. I've seen souvenirs, postcards. I've seen pens, which meant something to them. I've seen little potted plant. So it really ranges. And in some of the research I've done as a qualitative kind of research, interviewing executives about what's on their desk, we can also see that people, they are not aware of it, but usually people have some sort of emotional attachment to those things. And as you talk to them deeper, they start to realize, oh, actually, I've had this thing with me for the last 10 years. It moves with me every time I change my job. Why is that so? What does it remind you of? And slowly they go, well, when I'm thinking, I tend to play with it. I tend to twiddle with it. When I'm really stressed, I clean it. These little moments where we don't think mean a lot actually can mean so much for us just in a quick shot of time. That moment of play, to alter that state of mind, to chill out a little, relax a little, and to reduce those senses of anxiety. And I've had people come tell me that they talk to their plants, and they say, is it weird that I talk to my plants? Right. And I'm like, I don't think so, because I talk to my bears as well. And I think it is those ideas and perceptions of, am I weird if I do this? Is this normal? Am I being too silly? That really prevents us from playing and engaging in the imagination and creativity that kids do so well. They just don't really care what other people think. And I think as adults, we care too much, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely, I think so. But I think part of the reason why adults play less isn't just because the perception is that it's for kids, but it's actually quite tiring. To play pretend with an 8-year-old for 4 hours is exhausting. That means mentally exhausting, right? To say that it's just about fun and relaxation and is obviously untrue, because it takes a lot of cognitive power to be imagining an entire universe around you, a floor full of that's ice, and you have to slide everywhere you go, or you're a ninja for 3 hours with a little stick. But that actually requires quite a bit of caloric output for your mind, and anything that works your mind is training circuits, right? So I think that's something I think people tend to not appreciate about play, is that it's actually quite a bit of mental work.
It does take that, and I would say in the example you gave, I think when as a parent or as an adult we approach playing with a kid, it depends on what the intrinsic motivation is, because and play can be defined in so many ways. And one of the core founding fathers definition, Johann Wiesinger, who's a anthropologist, he defines it with 4 elements, where it's intrinsically motivated, it's fully absorbing, there's an element of surprise and fun, and it also involves some exaggeration and imagination, right? And I think it is that intrinsically motivated part that we sometimes don't allow ourselves to have, because if we're approaching playing with an 8-year-old as a chore of, oh, I need to think about this, then even though it seems like it's playing a game, we ourselves are not engaged in the playing, right? Because we count it as, I've got to look after the kid. However, when we're intrinsically motivated to play, just enjoy, do something for the sake of doing something, then even taking a walk can be considered play. Climbing a tree can be, twiddling your thumbs, daydreaming, staring. And it really depends on that state, because like you say, if I had to think of a whole story with my daughter, yes, it's exhausting, especially all the whys that she asks me. It's like, I'm like, go and talk to those HR executives, don't ask me. But if I can just, there's also the ideas of solitary play, playing with your own things. You don't always have to engage with people. And I think it's really about, what does play mean to you now? And what's the best way that you enjoy playing, instead of going, well, how do I play? What's the right way to play in some ways?
Do you notice any differences amongst your clients in the workplace or in communities surrounding, let's say, status in the company versus age versus gender, or different cultural backgrounds? Or are all adults suck at play until you show up?
I was pleasantly surprised where initially I thought in China, where most of our work is, people are less reluctant to play. And slowly what I realized is that it's not that they're reluctant to play, they just feel like they don't have permission to. There is and it isn't statistical, but of course there is a sense where the most senior person in the room almost feels the most exposed when they play, because they feel like, oh, can I still uphold my leadership image in front of these people? However, everyone who's who's reporting to that person are looking towards him or her to say, is he or she going to give me the permission to play and have fun in this context, right? So for us, our work is also around building that environment for these people in one of our play shops or workshops, to say, well, this actually is something we're asking you to do, experience it first. This is the context, this is the time. And slowly what we help them do is to learn, how do you apply it to your daily work life? How do you apply it at home? And slowly transition some of that even corporate culture to say, how can we encompass play in the culture, for example? And I've had clients, and we've done sessions where it was a whole hour of moving around, dancing, body up and down, body movement. And I think part of it also depends on the corporate culture. I do notice that in terms of age range, the younger ones tend to want to move around a lot more. The slightly older, maybe middle to senior executives like to have some sort of theory that explains to them, why am I doing this? Right. The younger ones is like, cool, let's go play, let's just have fun. Can't wait for it.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, but definitely the people at the top need to set the tone, right? The permission needs to be there for certain.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, at Mobio Interactive, we build digital tools, in particular all mindfulness, which is a clinically validated resilience tool that has objective quantification capabilities, and you are now and your content Bearapy is now available inside of Alm, and we're launching a whole new journey, step-by-step journey that contains elements of this curriculum and this content in an interactive way. And I guess question is, for us, I sort of know the answer, obviously, but for everybody else, why take this to a digital platform? Why bother? Because there's infrastructure involved, and yada yada yada. Can it go digital? Why go digital? What's your rationale there?
So one of the rationale isn't very logical. I think it's because also when we first met, I was like, I like these guys, I like you, I like what you're doing. Can we do something together? And really that also inspired my creativity and my sense of, can I try something new? Because I've always done more things offline. So it was also a challenge that I welcomed, and I really enjoyed working with you and your team on it. And I think a second thing is also thinking about, exactly the questions you pose. Can it go digital, or what form does it need to look like when it goes digital? In our work, we've mainly worked with intact teams, or we work in a corporate setting. And I do feel that the idea of playfulness needs to reach more people, the awareness of what play can bring to us, the introspection that we can have. And of course, on a digital platform, I think it's easier to reach more people, to let them have an experience of it. Yeah, which I think it's a different kind of scale that we can achieve in person, of course, right? And what we do in person complements what's on digital, and digital vice versa. So for me, it's also an expansion of the ideas that we want to advocate. How do we send this message to more people, that they have an experience, that they see it, and hopefully it sparks their curiosity to go and dig deeper on it. And I think that's my main driver for how can we partner with digital platforms like yourselves, who I think have similar vision for humanity, for our resilience, our emotional awareness. How can we bring this to the forefront of people's minds as they use it for their own betterment, for their own relaxation?
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Should we take a look at what you're, okay.
Well, so.
Let me share my screen here. So this is not released yet to the public. So this is the preview. The app on Mindfulness is available to the public already, but your special journey, we tap into the journeys here, and then here you can see it. The Bearapy listed in the journeys, and the tagline that we give it is "Getting serious about getting silly," which we hope is we hope it contains the feel of what playfulness is. So that's meant to be a little bit playful on its own. And then, of course, like all of the journeys inside of it's a step-by-step process that you run through. And this one has, I think, 13 or 14 different stages. 13 stages now, and there's 14th stage that's coming in later. But we haven't finished developing it yet. And cool stuff, Joseph Mokunis is. Then so then I thought what we might do is take a look at the forgotten play here. This particular stage. We'll pop into here, and then as the timer runs down here, typically this would be your audio content that would be that the person could listen to. But since we have you here in person, maybe you can discuss a little bit about the ideas of forgotten play. We've touched on some of this already, but maybe give us a flavor for what type of stuff we'd be listening to if we had the app on and we're engaged.
I think this one really helps us focus and take a journey into understanding ourselves as to why do we not play. Some of the things that we have already mentioned, do we give ourselves that permission? But if we take a step back and look at our lives, how do we live our lives? Are we running around? I think at the time of recording, we were thinking also of people going to the office, and obviously the world has changed a bit, but in the content of it, it's still the same thing. What are we doing that we think is a waste of time if we play? Are we so wrapped up now in all our Zoom calls? Are we wrapped up in front of our computer screens? We're wrapped up with work. We get too busy. We're thinking, that's not going to help with my career, whatnot. And all these focus of what we think are society's expectations really come into that hindrance of, can we play? Who are we inside? And going, well, maybe that actually is an inner child inside of us, but we're not letting it express itself. And in some ways, this is why have we forgotten how to play for ourselves? What is inhibiting us? Is our achievements really that important? What are the priorities in our life? Can we take a pause and think about that and highlight those areas for ourselves of, well, maybe these are the parts of my life that needs more emphasis, more energy, more time, instead of chasing titles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to pause it here. We all have been experts in our past in play,
Mm.
right? I mean, it's not like, I mean, some outliers, some exceptions, I'm sure, but you know, for virtually all of us, play isn't something we need to learn for the first time, right? It truly is forgotten for those of us who have stopped playing, as opposed to you know, completely new. And I think that's an empowering thing to know, is that you can, you know, if you were an expert at one point, and you could be an expert again, I would say. And that's an important thing to remember, is that, you know, at some point in our lives, we were really good. We were very natural at this. In fact, we couldn't get enough of it. That's all we wanted to do.
Yeah, that's all we did.
Bringing it back a little bit, day to day shouldn't be too hard. So maybe direct me as to what I'm supposed to do here now. There's I see a gold circle here on the bear, and what's the goal here?
I think when we were crafting these journeys, we also wanted to give people an experience of the interaction of what play could be and how simple it actually could be. So the circle there is right on the belly of the bear. And if you remember, as you were kids, my 3-year-old as well, like he always says, no, don't do it. But he's actually anticipating when he wants me to tickle him. And he, you know, the giggling and the laughter of, oh, don't tickle me, you know, and then running away. And I think that's some of the essence that we want to build in here, of reminding us of, you know, it can be that simple. It can be a tickle. And I think that's what we want to do here with the bear, is to give him a little rub on the belly and tickle him and see what happens.
Okay, so I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm rubbing the belly. Okay, I see what happens. Oh, yeah. A little smile. Hey,
there we go.
that's quite cute, actually. I'll keep it going. Oh, but then when I stop, it goes back down to a frown. I want to keep him smiling.
So you want to keep doing it. Right?
You got to keep rubbing to keep him smiling.
Yeah, and I think, you know,
that's
even, you know, I wish I could, you know, rub his belly now. And I think some things, of when you see a smile, it's contagious. When something is fun and as simple as that smile and a laugh, it really brings you to you that state of, I can also have a laugh and smile a little. You know?
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I mean, it's cute, right? It's
I know.
Fancy.
Sorry.
But it's and I also like the fact that it happens so soon, right? This is the second stage of the journey, and you get to do something a little interactive, and there's more things that, you know, for people to discover as well. Of course, throughout all of this. Maybe do you want to touch on some of the other parts? There's 3 stages in a row here. It says inner Ziggy, inner bear, inner you. What's all this about? What's an inner Ziggy?
So inner Ziggy is really, and I think inner bear also connected to it, is taking a deep dive into what are the different parts of selves that we have inside, right? So for me, it was a different bears with different names, different personalities. But for other people, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bear. It can be something else. It can be other kind of animals. But it's really thinking about, well, there is Enoch. If we think about it on the level of roles, you know, there is Enoch the mother, Enoch the entrepreneur, Enoch the friend, Enoch the daughter. But then going deep inside, so like, well, who are these people? How do they feel? And in psychology, we talk about, you know, for example, Carl Jung talks about the shadow side of us. Like I can be a loving mother, but sometimes I'm really impatient and I lose my temper, right? So that's the shadow side, which we prefer really not to think about sometimes, because it's not pleasant. It doesn't make us feel like a good person. However, I think the idea is to learn to embrace and accept all of those as parts of us, because otherwise then we end up just focusing on a few parts, and the parts that don't get expressed, the ones that are suppressed, will eventually come back and say, hey, you know, I'm here, a knock on the door, give me some attention. And so that really, those journeys take us into thinking about, well, what are the things that are a little bit uncomfortable for us to admit? What are some of the unpleasantness that we have to deal with? But to say, not because that they're unpleasant to reject them, but to see, well, why are they there? What do they actually help me with? And how does it make me the person I am, all right, as a holistic sign of self and a holistic perspective of self? So I do think those journeys are taking us into the deep dive of the journeys as we get to know ourselves and build that self-awareness.
Right. Okay. And also towards the end of the journey, you talk about a universal animal. What's the concept behind a universal animal? Do you remember?
I think it's much. I'm trying to remember why I said that. The context of it. What was that? What was the theme of that journey?
Well, I think it had to do with understanding that everybody has an inner Ziggy or an inner bear, right? That you know it's a universal thing for all of us of universal benefit for all of us to play, right? And that we all have something inside.
We have that inside, and I think the metaphor of the animal is helpful because as we also project who we are onto an animal, are you an eagle, are you a turtle, or a leopard, a tiger, and you think through, why do I think that? For example, if I prefer to be a wolf who lives in a pack, or am I a loner? You know, do I like to fly on my own? I think those metaphors of animals, in building a metaphor, it's already a form of play that helps us understand ourselves better of how do I like to play? You know, what works for me? How do I reinvigorate myself and rejuvenate myself through play? Because if I don't actually like being with people, why would I go out hiking with a group of people, right? If I prefer to be on my own to re-energize, then I would go hiking on my own. And so it's understanding that we all have those desires, our preferences, the way we want to play, what's that animal inside of us, when does it show up, and what is also the, at different times we may be metaphorically a different animal depending on our energy as well.
Right, yeah, so an animal could change. Everybody has an animal in their something, and multiple ones, and changing ones. I think that's interesting.
And sometimes, I talk to the unicorn in my living room kind of thing.
You are an N of 1 for how playfulness can really support mental health, or really help climb out of depression, or to provide resilience. How many more N's are out there, and do we have potential maybe to show real clinical impact of play in this setting, right?
I think there is already a lot of research in clinical impact of play. However, the focus has always been on children, because play therapy is a huge thing in the therapeutic world. When we're working with children, that's their way of expression. Play is their language, it's their thinking, especially when they don't communicate in languages that we know as English, Chinese, particularly with younger kids. Even with older kids or teenagers who have the grasp of language, they may not be able to articulate what's inside of them. And through play, how they play, observations of how they interact with toys, we see a lot of what's in the inner theater. So in some ways, clinically, it's proven to help children processing trauma, abuse, their depression, anxiety, loss, grief, divorce, all of that. Like play therapy in itself is quite recognized as a space. I think what lacks in research is, well, how does it help adults? How can we track it? How do we measure, quote unquote, measure playfulness in adults? And there are some research that are starting longitudinal studies of people who are playing and who don't play. And if you look at it from a different perspective, there's a very famous professor at Stanford University, Dr. Stuart Brown, who started investigating play, but not because of play itself. He was a criminologist, and he started studying people who did serial crimes and pretty serious crimes. And he started to notice a pattern that these people, a lot of them were deprived of play when they were younger. And so he started to study the correlations, right? And he started to look at he did some experiments with baby mice who were not allowed to play versus the ones who were allowed to grow up normally, and you put them in a maze, and the ones who weren't allowed to play don't even bother trying to find a way out. right? And he started to correlate them with helplessness, similar symptoms as depression, what it happens to us pathologically, and leading to different kinds of behaviors as adults. So there are some pockets of this research out there already, and I think what we need to do is to really take a lot of this academic research and apply it to our daily lives and say, well, if we know that this is the consequence of deprivation of play, then why today as adults we don't play? Why do we force our kids to do all this homework instead of play and free play, right? And he very famously said that the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. I think that's exactly what I lived when I didn't play. And that's also what I hope to send a message to other people to say, look, kids, think about this in terms of your mental health. And for sure, I agree with you. There are very many different means and ends to mental health. Can you consider play as one of them? It may not be the only one. It can complement with other things that you're doing, but at least don't ignore it.
Do you see a time when play curriculums or play therapy or Bearapy even will be considered a clinical intervention, or at least a preventative medicine, and might be even paid for by health insurers or by governments, or be part of the healthcare economy?
I would love for that to happen. At the moment, it's not so popular. I think for children is a different thing. I think that's much more recognized, but I would love for it to become a curriculum. I would love for it to become a curriculum also in business schools and leadership development. There are some design schools already that use a lot of those principles, but I would love to see it, transpire through lots more areas of our society.
Yeah, and this might be something where we can provide preliminary evidence as people use your Bearapy journey inside of Let me just share my screen for another moment here. Just to give an example. So here's another one of the stages where you can actually enter in your inner animal. Right? So I could pick. I really like for myself the example of a wolf, because one kind of majestic, but also they really work in teams, right? Really effectively. And they have a big focus on raising families, and they have a lot of play. And I grew up in the forests and the mountains of British Columbia, where wolves are relatively common. So it's also an animal that sort of reminds me of my childhood. And so that's a great thing to have here, that you can put this in, and actually you can. So I can type in wolf, and then this information will stay and will carry over to the next journey, and then I'll be reminded by this. Right. So it's an interactive thing, and you can update it as you go along as well.
And I really like the app where you can measure and have a record of these changes.
Yeah, that's really cool, right? I mean, inside of the app, we have all this wonderful material, or interactive material that allows us to assess people's well-being. And what we have inside of here is actually like, so this is an example here, the snapshot, 4 different components. The computer vision. This will be taking a selfie video, and it does analyses on my face. And then we have a mood board, very simple to use. Tap the words, how you feel. Stress slider, indicate how stressed I feel. And all that information is super useful, because then I can look over it again. I can see, okay, well, for me on average, I have a drop in stress, both according to my opinion, as well as according to the computer vision, which is fully objective. I have an improvement in mood, and I can see my, the words, how I change, and what time I tend to interact. And then of course all the individual sessions that I do. These ones are. I didn't do any snapshots in these ones because I was running through and testing the app. But like here's an example. Just last week of a couple ones. So that's really nice. We'll be able to identify, what's the actual effect of the Bearapy content on people all around the world. And of course, should be mentioned also that the app is available in a few different languages, and the Bearapy content is available in
Chinese as well.
Yeah, in Chinese. So far in Mandarin, but then soon
Yeah.
also in Cantonese, which is your mother tongue,
My
correct?
mother tongue. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that's important. Yeah, and it may be possible, I think, one day to have play type curriculums or interventions be part of the healthcare economy.
Yeah.
Provided there's sufficient evidence that it actually works.
Yeah.
And what is maybe to go a little exploratory here before we close the chat. What are the potential side effects of play? Negative side effects.
That we just end up wanting to play all the time.
but really though, I mean, is it possible that if you, I mean, no, right? I mean,
I don't think so. I don't think as adults that we would say that's all I want to do, because there is also a line to draw between, is this playing or is this addiction, which I get asked quite a bit sometimes of, when addiction is actually debilitating and causing your normal functioning to be impaired, where you don't, go about your life, you're actually losing the mental health functioning of your life. That's addiction. But playing, it's not. For me, I don't think there is any side effects there. And there might be that maybe I haven't researched on, so that's a good question to maybe explore and say, can it get out of hand, and where do you draw the line between playing, taking a risk? Is it too risky? Is this something actually harmful? Am I using play as an excuse? So those I don't have a definite answer for, but I think they are interesting questions to be thinking about. And those are things where I think for a person to introspect and think about, what are my boundaries? What for me works and what doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good point, right? I mean, you need to have balance. Obviously, at some point, you have to, as adults anyway, with the structure of our societies. At some point, we do have to get to work. You can't just play all the time. So balance is required. Too much of anything will kill you. Too much water, too much broccoli, anything at all, really. Right? You require
exactly.
Balance, moderation. That makes sense. But the ultimate point is that very unlikely to have negative side effects, right, by playing. It's a very safe form of preventative medicine, therapy, reducing burnout, enhancing creativity, can help with social interactions in the workplace. There's so much potential here, and it's so simple, and those two things together just make it so beautiful. So it's fantastic. Your story is really inspiring. It's incredible.
Thank you.
But it's also incredible how you didn't just take this as being okay, great, and then go back to your usual day job, right? You said, I can leverage this. This is something different. This is something that people need, and you take it, and then you even take it to the digital platform, which allows it to scale, right? And I think that's highly commendable, and the world owes you a great debt for that.
Thank you. Well, thanks for taking a chance as well on the, I think maybe in some ways the app is also pioneering in the research of, what are the impacts of play on people and their minds and preventative medicine. So I also, very grateful that we went into this partnership, and I'm really happy to see, the background, all the hard work we've put in over the time. It's it's out.
Yeah, it'll be out very soon. Yeah. So you can check out all the Bearapy content within All Mindfulness, available in your app stores around the world in a couple of different languages. Enoch, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this fireside chat. It was really, really wonderful having the discussion. We've recorded this, and so we'll pop this, assuming no technical difficulties, we'll pop this online sometime soon. So.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
And
thank you so much. And thanks to everybody. Yeah.
Great.
See you on the journey soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.